Welcome to the talk Weaving, Sovereignty, and Community. My name is Jordan Porman-Cocker. I'm the Curator of Indigenous Art at Crystal Bridges Museum of American Art. We're joined by Lily Hope, Sydney Akagi, and Laine Rinehart tonight. And to start us off, let's just go ahead and introduce ourselves. This can be in English, this can be in your own language. And we'll start with you, Sydney, and just kind of make our way down.
My name is Sydney Akagi. My Tlingit name is Klina Shawat. I reside here in Akwan and also on Taku Kwan on the Taku River. I started weaving in 2017 under Lily Hope. I worked at the Sealaska Heritage Institute at the time and continued weaving for a couple years independently and studying. In January of 2020, Lily asked me to maybe think about quitting my job and weaving full-time. And a few weeks later, I jumped into that and started studying under Lily Hope for Chilkat weaving. Since then, I have been awarded the time and money to create pieces from the Rasmussen Foundation, the Native Arts and Cultures Foundation, Bunnell Street Arts, and the Gotchman Foundation, and it has been an incredible experience, and I'm happy to be able to say that I am a full-time Chilkat weaver.
My Tlingit name is Wushkindenda'at. I am Raven Dukdaintan. My English name is Lily Hope. I'm a full-time Chilkat and Ravenstail weaver and mentor to many. I'm also a mother of 5, and I know this is my life's work.
Ichanagu Yayu Hat Duasak, Tiatan, Kagwantan Yadi. My name is Laine Rinehart, and I am of the Teton clan from Wrangell, Alaska, and also a child of the Kagwantan, and as well as Taos Pueblo on my mother's side. And my name there is Bakwalo Beno, which means spruce water deer. And I started weaving, I want to say in 2008 under Kay Parker, who was a longtime Ravenstail teacher here in Akwan country, and then started working with Lily Hope a few years afterwards, and then her mother Clarissa as well. And over the past few years, I've kind of delved into the process of working with John Woo or Mountain Goat Wool, and working kind of like in depth with that process, and maybe kind of actually easing off of the weaving part of it a little bit and more immersing myself in the material preparation.
Great. Deonde babon, deonde batsan, domtoya goy maakan, toibaga pedaltiga begopnedo, and malawathalava. My name is Jordan Porman-Cocker. I'm the Curator of Indigenous Art at Crystal Bridges Museum of American Art. My Kiowa name is Domtoya Goaima. And my family are paddletees and toy bows from the Redstone and Rainy Mountain regions of the Kiowa Comanche Apache Reservation in Oklahoma. So I traveled a long way to come up here, and I'm so grateful to sit down with you all and talk today, and excited about the Chilkat Commission blanket that's going to be coming to Crystal Bridges in 2027 on view for the first time. So I think, there's something to be said for gathering together in the place where the art is made, in the place where the art is from. And I think this panel is such a great step for Crystal Bridges as a museum in really meeting communities and artists where they're at. So thank you all so much for taking time away from family, home, the fishing season, which I got to try a little bit of in our first leg of our trip in Sitka, to be here. So I think I'd like to just kind of start from square one and ask, and this is not to anyone in particular, but what is a Chilkat blanket for those who don't know?
They know.
I the material-wise, or how we use it ceremonially, or?
I think it can be all of the above. I mean, we have this time to really kind of go a little bit deeper into the meaning. But a lot of our audiences are unfamiliar with Chilkat weaving, and maybe even less familiar with Indigenous textiles or weaving in general. So I think it's up to you.
I guess I could speak a little bit about the materials and how we've gotten to Chilkat weaving. Maybe Lily could talk about ceremonial purposes. Chilkat weaving in particular, which is behind us, I love to talk about the fact that it has evolved to this. We have Raven's-tail weaving that predates Chilkat weaving, and there are a lot of differences in those two pieces. So we have very geometrical lines and patterns in Raven's tail, and we have many more circles and faces, a lot of things that you would see in like a house front or like a totem pole, basically, that a lot of people are familiar with. So those designs were able to be woven into robes. So some of the things that our robes are made out of, Raven's tail robes were made out of mountain goat wool, and cedar was then spun into the warp, it evolved into being spun into the warp for Chilkat robes. What other differences do we have for materials for Chilkat?
Probably the introduction of the blue-green into the tertiary color, because I think Raven's tail at that time would have been the black of the natural dye or natural color of the wool fiber, and then yellow, and then so as over time, as we acquired more resources and just different techniques of dyeing, we were able to introduce new colors into the palette. So.
And it is quite unique that we have looms that are free hanging. Most people are familiar with looms that the warp is connected from the top to the base, and that shuttle motion of creating a woven piece, we are twining our weft around every single warp by hand, and so they're also very strong.
I think it kind of creates like a certain sense of freedom, like we aren't necessarily bound to that sort of just going one direction or the other with Chilkat weaving. It kind of helps, create those curvilinear shapes, and it's kind of interesting when you talk about that, Sydney. Somebody approached me once when I was demonstrating, and they're like, "Are you doing macrame?" And I was like, at first I was kind of like, and then I thought about it, and I was like, well, it's actually not too different. Like there's twining and macrame and different types of braiding and stuff like that. And I was like, good guess, but then we kind of talked about some of those same things.
Yeah. I also think it's really beautiful about Chilkat robes that you can see individually the artist. Everybody circles, they have a formula, but when you look at somebody's weaving, you can really tell how I would do something a little bit different than Laine would do something. We have the patterns there. Yeah, where Raven's tail, you're following the pattern, and so often you change what you're doing or the color, and we're all doing the same thing, but Chilkat is so individual. So, yeah.
Same question, Lily. What is a Chilkat robe?
Our Chilkat robes, or Chilkat dancing blankets, are woven to document identity, history, dream, story, similar to a totem pole recording key elements for stories on the Northwest Coast. The Chilkat dancing blanket can hold similar space, and there is a raven, and there is this flying being, or there is a diving whale, that we're recording those parts of our story, or weaving our literal history into the work as clan objects, as sacred property at Uwu. We're bringing little beings to life that become part of our cultures and part of our communities.
And I love the way you talk about knowledge as something that's a collective process of holding and carrying. And for me, it seems like there's this connection between, the ways that this art form holds, stores, keeps, transmits knowledge, through the designs and the patterns that are included in the pieces. I guess my next question is about time. So how long does it typically take to weave, let's say, a full-size blanket? That might vary from artist to artist.
I love to throw out the answer 1,200 to 1,500 hours, but that is, I mean, there's so many factors that go into a robe. If you're using machine spun weft, that amount of time that it would take to create that is gone. If you're harvesting your mountain goat, it's going to create that much more time because it's a lot of wool to gather and prepare and spin. There's so many factors. You have to get up and take care of your kids, or I know my weaving doesn't get as far along during fish season or moose season. So there's so many factors that go into it.
I always go for the 2,500 hours. It's a little more than one whole year at 37 and a half hours a week, right? And that's not fair because most weavers alive today in 2025 are not able to work 37 hours a week. We are fishing and gathering berries and putting up jam and taking care of our families and helping people transition into the netherworld and all of that. So it has historically taken about 2 to 2.5 years from me to finish a robe from start to finish. And that parallels with Canadian weavers I know of who have woven 3 or 4 or 5 robes. It's about a 2.5 year process, regardless of whether you are starting from mountain goat or buying your warp from a skilled spinner that you value.
I'm so glad that you brought up that, just sort of how balancing the production of such a time-intensive robe really unfolds over time. I think that's something that really distinguishes many art forms within our Indigenous communities from other areas of the art world, where it's like, oh, we're going to work on a photograph, or we're going to work on this, or we're going to work on that, and the volume of works that are available, by a certain artist is high. And when we think about time-intensive art forms like Chilkat weaving or weaving from other communities, Dene weaving, these really are works that take up a human life to create, and so I think, it's really great to hear a little bit about that process. And so there was some really great mention of materiality, and I know for the Commission for Crystal Bridges, materials play a significant role and distinguish this robe from maybe others that have been made in recent years or modern times. Can you talk a little bit about materiality? Maybe if you want to start, Lily, and then we can go a little bit further into that process.
We've had easy access to merino wool for 4 decades, 40 years, where we can make a phone call or get online and order merino. And we've moved away from the community that is built through sitting around a fire or sitting around a coffee table, laughing and joking and eating cookies and processing mountain goat hair and cooking our cedar bark for days and then sitting around and processing our cedar bark. That community has shifted in a movement toward easily accessible materials. So the significance of this one of the first robes made of mountain goat and cedar bark in the last couple of 100 years, being built now is a return to that community and a return to being together and many hands making light work. Remembering that this is how we were born, ancestral lineages way back in time, that we were born to work together. We were born to do this community work, to build something bigger than a single one of us, because this work has never been about the singular artist or singular weaver. It has always been about what are we bringing to life? What story are we sharing? What are we documenting together?
And I guess like a follow-up to that I have is really about that in-depth process of creating material from what we see here. Would either of you, Sydney or Laine, like to talk about that process, about maybe where you start and maybe your favorite part of that process?
Well, I think, Lily, you bring up a really good point about the community aspect of it. Everything that sits in front of us here right now is only here because I got a call from, there was two gentlemen in town, Rick and Steve, and they're kind of hobby biologists that track mountain goats, and they emailed, I think, you at one point, and then you passed on their information to me, or my information to them, and I went up with them the side of a mountain and got a hide from a carcass, and I think the first fragments of mountain goat that I ever received were from Shadufla Hanlon, who had some pieces left over from a hide that she processed, and she kind of gave me, some instruction, and then was just kind of sent me on my way, all of probably about 10 years ago, and that kind of started me on my journey, if we want to go back to the beginning, and then just, not being afraid to reach out and pass information on to each other. The first person that I talked to in depth about spinning was Megan O'Brien, and we happened to be in Juneau at the same time, and I brought a bag of mountain goat hair to me, and she showed me the drafting process and how to thigh roll it, just like you would with Chilkat warp in general, but just with creating the weft yarns that you would just draft it like really, really like a lot finer. And then just kind of creating those connections within a community of people. I think in a way we can kind of almost romanticize this idea that, it went from, the top of the mountain to, the loom and was woven by one person. It's been great to go through that experience to some degree, but we're never alone at any step along the way. There's always people that have surrounded us or uplifted us throughout that process or brought it down the mountain themselves. And then, I've had friends that are hikers that have brought me wool, and it's just a blessing, really, when it comes down to it, so.
Yeah, there's something really nice about the folks who would reach out knowing that you're weaving or a weaver and offer that, material generously. I think that's really great to hear.
It's beautiful. I was kind of thinking earlier, there's, and then there's, knowledge that extends down into, British Columbia or present-day British Columbia and Washington as well, like Coast Salish weavers. And there was a woman, I just recently watched her on YouTube. I don't know if it's okay to reference YouTube or not, but I think her name is Carrie Lynn Victor, and I want to say she's a Coast Salish weaver, but she was talking about, how do we value something like mountain goat wool? And I guess what she had heard from people that had come before her was that one handful of mountain goat hair is worth 2 handfuls of something else. So whatever it is that you're willing to trade, it's double that, So it's just kind of just interesting, like how do we even like start to kind of quantify what is this worth? I don't know.
Well, I think that's so important to think about. I know in my community, in the Kiowa community, elk teeth are like diamonds. They're so part of the way that we value ourselves, value each other, and it really denotes something when people are dressed properly and have elk teeth as a part of our adornment, a part of our regalia. But because of, westward expansion of farming, wild elk are not what they were. So, you see the introduction of synthetic cast like teeth being incorporated, and so it is special when you actually have access to the folks who now have the most I guess the best capacity to collect those items. And sometimes it's museum collectors or hunters. My brother's a hunter, but yeah, I think it really highlights the shift in we might be in the same landscape or we might be in the same communities, but so much around us is constantly changing.
Yeah.
and that changes the access to our sacred or precious materials. Yeah, and Sydney, you are going to be processing some of these materials for the commission. You mentioned earlier today. Can you tell us a little bit about the dyeing? I know it's in depth, and we've heard a little bit about collecting the fibers and spinning, but I'm interested in these gorgeous, rich colors that have and carry, meaning and significance in the community.
Some of these colors, the natural dyes, we are using natural dyes on the mountain goat robe, have more of the muted tones in them. So more synthetic dyes are going to give us the colors that you see behind us. But what we're taking this natural material, such as, we've talked about mud and moss and bark. There's a dye group that went through and tested everything, trying to figure out exactly where to get these colors from. And I find it completely fascinating to look at really old robes and wonder how I'm still not getting my dyes that rich. So how do we do this? There's so many secrets that we need to unlock. But for instance, wolf moss is something that we would use to dye. And that process of the ammonia to keep the dyes as rich as possible, different mordants and things, it's very complex and it's constantly changing, and yeah.
We have the 3 core colors of hemlock bark being cooked for the better part of a day that gives us that reddish brown, almost black. Some of the weavers have been experimenting with adding, or we have discovered that if you add iron to the bath, like actual iron nails, or cook it in cast iron, you're getting almost an acid dyed black, like a true black that we have on our leggings and our favorite handbags. What we've found, and this is credit to Dorica Jackson, who did a hemlock dye down in Ketchikan. She did the hemlock dye with an iron oxide, oxidization, and over 16 years while she was weaving her robe, the iron started breaking down and making the wool brittle and was breaking the black yarn. So when we look at historic robes, are the black borders and black design fields that are kind of falling apart in our fingertips, are those the dyes that have the black in it, that iron in it that is starting to eat away or crumble the yarns? The seafoam green is made from a copper ammonia. The copper goes into the ammonia and turns this beautiful cobalt blue. When you pour the cobalt blue liquid over your yarns, it doesn't turn cobalt blue. You don't get blue sky. You don't get the Arkansas blue skies. You get a slate gray, like a Juno gray. So then you have to go get a little bottle of, or you have it standing by, either Heinz or Bragg's brand apple cider vinegar with the mother in the jar, in the bottle, and you immediately pour that apple cider vinegar over your gray yarns, and it's the best science, but not good for kids, because it's so toxic in the ammonia. Pour the vinegar over, and you get it just magically pops into seafoam green. It's the sweetest, most fun thing of being a weaver is oh, I got the seafoam green. And the yellow that Sydney was talking about, we love wolf moss the most. It is a lichen that grows in the Cascade Range down Washington, Oregon. We love this lichen because we can trade for it or buy it on Etsy, sorry. And it comes to us in Ziploc bags, preferably dried, and we can let it sit for months or years and dye whenever we want. Who doesn't want to choose when to dye or know when I'm gonna dye on Friday. Okay, I'm gonna get my hair done so I can dye on Friday. Just kidding. But that yellow from the wolf moss is one of the most light, fast yellows that we have found through all this research. There was a Chilkat dye project with the Alaska State Museum. And not just the wolf moss, but there was one other yellow that you have to dye the same day that you harvest the raw material. And that one was horsetails. And if you put those horsetails, a volume of horsetails into a pot, cook it up, you're going to get a beautiful yellow. There's 40 different other items in Southeast Alaska that could dye a yellow, but from a longevity, do you want that yellow yarn to be yellow in 10 years, 20 years, 50 years? Wolf moss, horsetails. We're giving away ethnographic secrets.
Well, I love it because thank you for answering that so thoroughly. I think it's so wonderful to hear about how much knowledge goes into these robes, even in the most subtle ways, like achieving vibrancy and color and tonality. And I think those are the sort of insights that I mean, we don't always have to share with outside people as Indigenous artists or community members, but I think it also really highlights that cultural knowledge and like relational system of valuing different things, even as subtle or small in our lives or in environments as moss, and how these aspects of connections to nature, connections to the land, enrich not just one person's experience, but many people's experiences. So thank you. I am really interested in how the blankets are used and what it means to wear a Chilkat blanket. Can you talk a little bit about that cultural significance? Maybe Laine?
Sure. You know, I think kind of just speaking to what we were talking about earlier, that it's a way of just, you know, showing identity, our ties to the land, our clan histories, our stories. In modern adaptations, we've had, you know, Lily spearheaded the Weaving Our Pride robe as far as just being an organizer, and then a support network for mentor weavers to, you know, work with LGBTQ youth in the community. So that was kind of a big instrumental way of, you know, really kind of asserting our identity and our place of being here as part of these Native communities, as we've always been, right? And then also outside of our Native communities as well, welcoming in those that are, you know, identify along the, you know, rainbow spectrum, so to speak. So I think that was pretty instrumental healing, I think, for, you know, a lot of us involved, and really just gave opportunities for people to be seen, you know, perhaps for, you know, and acknowledged and loved, and really feeling that connection with each other. So I think that, you know, that is immensely important, you know, for all of us. And you know, in the historical context, you know, it does go back to, you know, telling the story of where we came from, you know, things of that nature. And it's, you know, I think we often think of it as being alive in its own right. You know, it's not just kind of a two-dimensional object. It has kind of a life of its own. And then as, you know, as it moves on from the weaver, it begins to, you know, take on that life and have that independence. And many people may end up wearing it throughout its lifetime.
Just to kind of piggyback off of that, I don't exactly remember at what point I was looking at the piece I was working on, and there's significant moments happening in my life, and I've always known how special Chilkat robes were, but it was at that time, I think it was my mother-in-law passed away, and I realized that when I'm looking at these historical robes that we have, there's so much woven, there's so much time going into that whole piece that you'd wonder, like, what was happening that's significant within these people's lives as they were weaving these pieces. And so they do document our history, whether we can see it or not, in there, and I think it's really beautiful.
Exactly. I think it sort of goes back to your comment about being able to distinguish the hand of a weaver in a piece that you're seeing, and, you know, I think that's it's amazing that close looking still carries those moments of time.
Yeah.
I know we talked about this commission piece as something that would be a robe that would have a sense of shared authority. And museums as spaces, historically and presently, especially in the United States, have an issue, we'll say. And there's an intersection with the Native American Graves and Repatriations Act with shared authority and the absence thereof. And we see in different countries around the world, such as Canada, Australia, New Zealand, where I went to university, wonderful models of the ways that institutions can better work closely with Indigenous tribes and nations to literally share authority. And so something we talked about, and this is really piggybacking off of a conversation that I had with you, Lily, early on, was what would that look like for this Chilkat robe? And so I think if you want to talk a little bit about that, I think that would be wonderful. And what we had highlighted very early was the importance of having the robe danced regularly, and that it's not, static.
That was really early in our conversations to make sure that the work that's being built is not only an ambassador for Native peoples of Southeast Alaska to kind of represent who we are in Arkansas and the broader lower 48 Native communities or in the museum world, but to make sure that it does return to Southeast Alaska and dance every couple of years, whether that is celebration or another really significant event. But having that joint ownership or this relationship of you're not going away forever. I'm not going to surrender this being. We're not going to collaboratively make this being who is going to leave our zip code forever. We're going to come home again and come home again and come home again.
Thank you. Yeah, that's really important. And I think we had also talked about how places in New Zealand have this built into the policy understanding of not referring to collection items or artifacts as that, but referring to them as taonga. So this sort of concept of tangible items that have intangible qualities. And you shared with me today, I won't dare say it wrong, the version of this concept in your language.
In Tlingit, we call it Ad'uhu.
Ad'uhu.
It's our sacred owned property. It can be, and that owned property by a particular clan or community can be story, it can be oratory, it can be song, it can be Chilkat robes, it can be regalia made of other materials, carvings can be Ad'uhu. They are one of us. They are one of us, whether it is story or song or blanket. They're part of our community.
Thank you. I think something that is really interesting about this sort of concept of shared authority is really entering into a period in our shared Indigenous histories where artists and maybe museum practitioners or curators we have a little more freedom than our parents had, than our grandparents had, and certainly more than our great-grandparents had in the 1920s when most of them were not considered U.S. citizens. I'm really interested in the ways that you as artists are sort of envisioning your work in that longer legacy or that longer timeline. And I guess my question is, how do you see your work relating to the people that have gone before? Those could be individuals or as a group, and what do you hope for your weaving to do in the world?
I guess for me, living here in Juneau and trying to be proud of my culture growing up in the early 2000s was really hard. And I was lucky enough to go to Fort Lewis College and be more immersed into the Native community. Mm-hmm. And I always knew that when I came home, I wanted to give back to my community. I didn't really know how, but I thought that was through my career in Native healthcare and then at the Sealaska Heritage Institute. What I didn't know was all of that was leading me up to weaving. And I always, all my aunts and my grandma and everybody who passed away before I even came into this weaving journey, it makes me so sad that they don't get to see this, but in the same sense, I feel like because I'm doing this now without them, that they are really the reason that I am getting to do this. I feel like I'm getting to do this so that I can have, I can be proud of it for them and be out there and sharing it with the world. Like I never expected as an artist getting a degree in art to have it lead me here 14 years after graduating from college for art. And I feel like I'm paving the way for my children to be proud and to be able to do this as well and like be immersed in their culture. So I guess for me, it's really just this path of like connecting with my culture and getting to live this life that my family wasn't able to live. And I know they wanted to, and oh my gosh, I would love to speak to them now about it, but yeah, I think in the future, education and being proud that to me is everything. To be able to be proud of my culture and my work and let my children know that that is also, they are allowed to be proud as well. So.
I think for me, just the idea of giving strength and then hope and just continuing on with that knowledge base. And now that you mention it, Sydney, I think kind of that direct connection that we may have never had, or at least I never had with my grandmother, but she was an artist, and sometimes I wonder, where did I get this creative gene from? And my mom is very creative, yes, but then my father's mother was just a prolific knitter and crocheter and painter too. And I think through this process, even though I never got a chance to meet her, I have a connection with her somehow now through this process. And then, just the transference of knowledge, right? Somebody was willing to share with you something that they knew, and then, maybe somewhere along the way you're able to return it in a different way, to somebody else. So, yeah.
I appreciate you asking this question because that isn't part of my gain storm. I wasn't thinking like, what does this mean in 100 years? Or how far do you want me to go with that? And all I can do is be here now, with the work that was left in my hands, right? Someone recently said, I want you to look down into your palms and I want you to recognize that the work that you're doing, these are your mother's hands. These are your grandmother's hands. These are your aunties and all of your ancestors. So that's what I do, right? My hands go to the work. But someday, my hands will be there, and my children and my students will carry that on.
Thank you. Yeah, I think, something that is really potent, and for folks who have an understanding of our art forms, we all carry is that connection across time. And any time in my short life that I come up against things that I'm not quite sure about, there are people, my grandmothers, my mother, that I call on to kind of help me out in that moment. And I think, this question around time is so, it's valuable because, it's something that really came up for me, even thinking about this commission. Like, we're a museum and I'm a curator, and we're asking you to create this piece that's going to represent a considerable amount of your time and every person who's a part of it. And there's something really generous about thinking about what that means, forwards and backwards. So thank you for answering that. I didn't mean to make you cry. I guess something that I've been really curious about with this commission is also about scale. So this is more of a maybe fun or silly question about your preferences as an artist, but what is your favorite thing to weave? We can just go down, start with Sydney.
How many pieces do I have up right now? I think I have 5 pieces I'm weaving right now. Lily says they feed each other. They're all different. I love weaving robes. Yeah, I think when it comes down to it, I can do the smaller pieces in between, but there's something about a robe and yeah, having that connection to it, breathing that life into it, and it feels like you're having another child. Yeah, the amount of time and effort and preparation, everything, it's, yeah.
Okay, I'm thinking smaller. I'm thinking like shapes. That's where I'm about right now. But you know, I agree. You know, working on robes is fantastic. Just the in-depthness and the thoroughness of it. But like as far as shapes go, I like noses. Oh. I love just like weaving a nice nose, and I've been kind of trying to experiment with noses a little bit, looking at different variations on noses. So on my current robe, I kind of have this like more of like a kind of a hook going on, and not so much the, what would you call this, the bridge? Mm-hmm. Yeah, of the nose. It's, yeah, it's kind of an abbreviated nose, and I like it a lot.
Does it remind you of somebody in your life, though? Because that was
that was going to be my follow-up question.
Lily.
Yeah, you know, the first nose I wove reminds me of my Aunt Nola's nose, actually. So when I looked at it, I was like, you know, okay, I can kind of see, I can see where this comes from.
Yeah,
yeah. Beauty standards, yeah.
They say you can tell a weaver by the way that they weave their nose. That you can track a weaver through decades by the way their noses are shaped. We have yet to prove this because our noses have evolved, right? We can't necessarily say, oh, that was Laine's nose, and then another Laine nose, and another. I love dreaming up and holding space for robes to be created and co-creating those large beings, because I'm raising 5 children on my own, and it's really lonely and sad and hard and heavy. So every Chilkat dancing blanket that I have helped bring to life, there have always been at least 1 or 2 other sets of hands that have helped bring that forth. And it feels like more joy. It feels lighter. It feels more inclusive. It feels, I mean, yes, I love birthing Chilkat blankets with many midwives and doulas and supportive hands. I go back to weaving earrings because they're 1 square inch of ceremony, and it's a dopamine kick of like, oh, I finished a pair today and I haven't even made breakfast yet. You know, that is a great kick to like, you know, do your most important work. 1 a day, just that's my 1 a day. If I was a screen printer, I'd be pulling a screen or, you know, making another print, but my earring is the 1 a day that keeps my hands in the weaving, even when I'm traveling on an airplane or I can't because someone's sick or whatever else keeps me from my weaving of my robes. At least I'm weaving something every single day and getting that, it's done.
I love that. That's so great to think about milestones too, and like what is a larger piece, and then what's more achievable, or what do you just enjoy? Yeah, I am a bead worker, and one of my favorite parts of beadwork is before the needle is going through the hide, and I'm out in nature looking at leaves, different species of leaves, and drawing inspiration, and then like pressing them. Yeah, that's it. Always there's a joy factor there. At that stage, which is like, there's no beads happening yet, or buying beads. I bought some downtown today.
One of my favorite things to do is have an hour-long call with Lily where we come up with ideas, and suddenly we're like, oh my gosh, I gotta get off the phone. I have to go weave.
Yes. Start that and start that one and start that one. So even though I love weaving earrings, I too have 4 or 5 smaller projects that are going in various stages. Like this is just braids, and this one has like all the top shapes and all of that. So they feed each other, because you get hooked on one thing and go deep for a few hours on this one, and you're like, oh, it's making me nervous to shape this thing again. I haven't done that in a long time. Yeah, I'm going over here. I'm gonna go work on this one.
Food breaks, breaks for inspiration.
Yeah.
Well, I guess you mentioned the quality of visiting and what it means to have someone sit beside you when you're excuse me, I'm thinking about beadwork, when you're weaving. What does that ritual look like, or what does that little micro environment look like? Do you need a certain type of comfort space, or to be sitting, or to be kneeling?
So where I've been weaving a lot lately is actually kind of close to where my mother's from in Taos Pueblo, but for us it means having green chili pozole like simmering on the stove, and then there's like a group of like 3 or 4 of us weaving, and then so just like that aroma and like the setting of just, you know, you're gonna get fed. And I mean, for me, it's like a big draw to have like, okay, I don't have to worry about dinner for tonight. Somebody's cooking dinner, like the pot's on the stove, and whenever you want to, you can get up and get a bowl of chili, and no pressure to all sit down at the table, but we're enjoying each other's space. I think it's almost like, I think you've talked about this too, like parallel play. Like we can go for hours without having and then now and then we'll remind each other that, oh, we're in the same space with a funny joke or whatever it might be.
Green chili, that sounds good.
I know. We need to up our standards.
I know. Where's the crock pot of whatever we're supposed to be making? Goodness. Yeah.
I think I like to imagine what it was probably like when robes and tunics were being created way back when, and I don't think they weren't done solo, and there was so many people helping gather and spin and dye and weave different parts. But also food was already prepped. The fish had been dried all summer, and we were spending the whole winter hanging out inside like that. And so we are creating these pieces and trying to do it somewhat solo, which is really funny because my Chilkat name means one solitary woman. So I try, but it is hard. And I like to think back to, there's more people involved in this. Like it's not a solo thing, so the weaving together is important.
Yeah. I like to weave in public as much as possible, residencies and places where I can share, which is why I own a downtown public studio where tourists and locals can come and see the latest thing that I'm working on. Because I like the chaos of trying to make all of these shapes and also explain what I'm doing at the same time. There was a point, I was a resident at Sealaska Heritage Institute, and afterwards I called my sister on the way home and I said, oh, it was the best day. We had like 400 tourists come through, and they asked me, how long does it take, and what is that made of, and and all the same questions over and over all day long. And she was like, oh, that sounds like the worst experience. Why would you do that to yourself? And she was like, oh, because you're a performing artist, and you just happen to be weaving while you're performing. Like this is your happy place in the sharing of knowledge. This is like little snippets of teaching moments all day long. That's your happy place. And I was like, oh, it is. So it's a disservice to my community. I will just speak for this person, this entity. It is a disservice to my community, to my students, to my city, to where I'm at, to weave alone. That having people sitting next to me, yes, you can bring cookies, having them bring me cookies and sharing goofy stories or jokes, that is how I can best serve the future, is having those people with me. The last 3 summers, I've had 1 or 2 apprentices or interns supported by Sea Alaska Heritage Institute or Chilkat and Haida, and these students have made huge strides. One of them is with me here this summer, and her weaving from 2 years ago when she was still in high school to now when she just graduated, volumes, like just huge bounds in skill development, and that feeds my heart, that feeds my spirit, that this will not die in my hands. Someone will step into my bougie shoes.
The bougie heels.
Shoes.
Well, and I guess I'd love for folks who are watching this talk in the future, or even in the near future, to have a sense of what you're working on. Is there something that you're working on currently that folks should know about?
I'm very fish obsessed. And so right now, the project I'm very excited about, which I forgot in my introduction to say that I am Kiksati. And so living on the Taku River and being a Salmon Beyond Borders ambassador, I am very passionate about protecting the salmon, and I was trying to figure out how I could connect my work with that passion of protecting those salmon. And being Kiksati and looking at the herring protector robes, I was like, I need to do a transboundary river protection robe. So I'm currently in the process of weaving a transboundary river salmon river protection robe. And the idea is to weave one for every transboundary river in Southeast Alaska being affected by the mines in Canada and the runoff. So that's my big project right now. I'm excited about.
I have a full-size robe on the loom, so hopefully next couple years I finish that up. I have a couple of weaving residencies coming up over the next few months, so.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
Are you able to share where those are?
One up in Homer, Alaska with Brunel Street Arts, and then the other one at the Ghost Ranch in New Mexico.
Congrats.
Thank you.
I'm finishing commission for a museum in California and starting the material processing of this, which will take me to the end of the year.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for being a part of this artist panel this evening. I feel like we really went there, and I hope that folks who are watching, get a better sense of you and your work, and just grateful for the hosting that we've received, the team and I traveling to Juneau. So aho malo apito for having us.
Goodness, cheese.
Goodness, cheese.